Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so busy staring at the picture, I didn't even see we went live. It's good to be with you this morning as we gather for our cup of coffee. It's another gorgeous day here in Arlington. The birds are at the feeder, the cactus is being prickly, and all is right with the world. Well, this morning I want to talk to you about rocks, stones, boulders, whatever you want to call them. I guess boulders would be a little bit of a stretch since rocks are usually something you can pick up and carry on your own. Yesterday we talked about carved in stone, how you put something indelibly. You want to remember it. You want to keep it as a memorial. And we talked about where that phrase came from. Well, today I want to talk to you about something that's always intrigued me. I've seen them for years. We go hiking various places across the country. We've been blessed to hike in many national parks and gorgeous trails through some beautiful country. And along the way, I've often seen little stacks of rocks. 5, 6, 7 rocks just stacked one on top of another to make a little tower. And they always kind of intrigued me. And sometimes you'll go to an area and you'll see a lot of them stacked all over the place. Well, usually that means it's a place where people like to gather, and there's lots of stackable rocks in the area. So people stack the rocks. And sometimes I wonder, why did they stack the rocks? Was there anything in particular? Were they trying to direct somebody? Were they just trying to see who could stack them taller? I don't know. But a number of years ago, Shirley and I were blessed by some dear friends of ours to use their cabin up on Lake Superior. And it was a great time that weekend. It was a time when Shirley and I had stepped out of full-time ministry and were looking to see what God had in store for us next. And it was on that weekend that we really felt the Lord telling us that he wanted us to launch out with PonderingGod, a ministry that was designed to help tell the stories of both the Old and New Testament, along with everyday life and how we can see God in everyday life. And we decided to launch that ministry that weekend. And we were fervent in prayer that the Lord would bless our ministry. We wrote our mission statement that weekend. It was a great time. And in the course of that weekend, we went down and walked along the shore of Lake Superior, which was right near the cabin. And we just loved the scenery and the piles of rocks that were left there from the people who owned the cabin and friends and others who had been by that area. There were lots of standing stones laying around. And so we started picking up some rocks and stacked them. And we got a nice stack of rocks and we brought them inside and we put them on the table in front of us as we were in our meditation and prayer and writing that weekend. I still have that pile of rocks. I brought it with me. It's at our house right now. And that pile of rocks reminds me of that weekend. Every time I see that pile of rocks, I remember God's faithfulness and the time that he led us through that wonderful time of discovery and those wonderful years of ministry and speaking and writing and how God has been so faithful to us. They've really been a great reminder. But of course, the idea of being reminded in stacking rocks is, it's not ours, it's God's. Several times in the Old Testament, he asked his people to stack rocks in a certain place to remember something, to signify something. One of those was the 12 memorial stones at the crossing of the Jordan. And listen to this from Joshua chapter 4. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priests stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down to the place where you lodge tonight. When Joshua called 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe, and Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each one a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, so that this may be a sign among you. So they did. They went out into the midst of the Jordan where God had parted the water, and they found 12 stones. Now, these must have been pretty big stones because they put them on their shoulder to bring them out. And they brought them out and they stacked them up to be a sign. God had delivered them. And then the great part. This shall be a sign among you, it says in verse 6. When your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it passed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. Yeah, it's not carved in stone, it's built of stone. And those stones are stacked there as a memorial, as a reminder every time your children pass by here and they see those stones and they say, what are those stones for? You have the opportunity to tell them the story. Those stones that I have stacked at home stood in our office at home for many years. And occasionally people would ask about them. And we would have the joy of telling them. I actually cleared a spot on my shelf the other day here to bring them to the office. I want to have them here. As a reminder, a visual reminder to me of God's faithfulness through all generations, and certainly how he has blessed my family over the years. So what are your standing stones? What are those things that you have that remind you of God's great faithfulness? Maybe it's a photograph of a particular time. Maybe it's a single stone that you picked up from some vacation that you had that's kind of a treasured memento for you. Maybe it's something you purchased on a trip, or a gift you were given by someone at a particular time in your life. But my guess is that we all have those kinds of stones, those kinds of memorial reminders that tell us a story. And better yet, tell someone else a story. When they see it and they ask, what is this for? You can tell them. I hope that you have memorial memories like that. I know that I have several items in my life that serve as those kind of memories. One of them right offhand, let me scoot over and get it. Oh, is this cross right here. It's a cross made from a bolt that came out of the cathedral church in St. Petersburg, Russia, one of the cathedral churches in St. Petersburg, Russia, St. Michael's Lutheran Church. And St. Michael's at one time had been an enormous cathedral. It had seated thousands of people. At the time that we were there, they had converted this once grand church into a soccer ball factory. For a while, it had made military boots, but most of its time was spent making soccer balls. And this was all after the Bolshevik Revolution. 70 years had passed. They had destroyed the sanctuary. They had ripped out everything that bore any symbolism. They had removed the stained glass windows and put in plain glass windows. They had put 3 floors across the once massive church to put in all the machinery necessary to make soccer balls. When we arrived there some 70 years later, after this was done, the soccer ball machinery was all gone. The church had now been, the building had now been returned to the church and was being used as a sanctuary, a gathering place. The lower level was a place that um, shipments would come into the country from orphan grain train, and they would be sorted and processed and distributed across Russia. The second floor was administrative offices and some classroom space, and the third floor was a sanctuary, and they were putting in some Sunday school rooms. And in the area where they were building the Sunday school rooms, so there were footings from these large machines that were up there. This was one of those bolts that stuck up out of the floor to hold one of those big machines. And the first day we arrived, the only tool we had to try and take out those footings out of the concrete into which they'd been set was an upholstery hammer. If you don't know what those are, ask around. They're probably about 8 ounces, 10 ounces at best. And the upholstery hammers were used for nailing in tacks on upholstery. But we had several of those at our disposal because we didn't have any other tools that first day. And so the kids worked, high school kids, worked with these upholstery hammers to chisel away at the footings to get out the bolt. Well, it took them most of the day, and they removed one. One footing came out that day, and it was a great victory. They hooped and hollered and celebrated the fact that God had allowed them, helped them to make this room a little bit safer for kids to be in there. There was one less bolt sticking in the floor. The good news is by the time we left, we had all the bolts removed from the floor, either dug out or ground off. But God was faithful to us in that time there. So I brought that bolt back with me, and I told the story of how long we worked to get that bolt out. When I got it out, it was much rustier than this, and it was bent, and it was kind of ugly looking. But it, to me, was a great reminder of what God had done in that place. And shortly after I came back, I shared this with some friends and was telling the story of this bolt. And one of the friends said, Can I have the bolt? Can I take it? I'll bring it back to you next week. I said, certainly. So he took the bolt and straightened it, cleaned it, and cut it and formed it into a cross. And it has stood for me as a constant reminder of that trip to St. Petersburg, of those faithful saints who worked so hard to help restore what once was a grand church into a place of vibrant ministry and life-giving gospel ministry. So I was blessed, and I now have this as my standing stone, as my memorial reminder. So I'd love to hear about your reminders. What are those things that you have that remind you of God's faithfulness in your life? Maybe you could even share a picture with us and a story. Go ahead. We'd love to hear from you. Well, I don't want to let my coffee get cold. Oh, it's going to be a great day. I hope your day is blessed too. And I hope that you take time today to remember God's faithfulness in your life. Well, let's begin our morning with prayer. Father, we thank you for this day and for all those reminders, both subtle and bold, that remind us of your ever eternal faithfulness to us. Help us to share the story of your faithfulness with others. We ask this in Jesus' strong name. Amen. Hey, be blessed. The magic number of the day is 86. Yes, 86 subscribers. Can you imagine? We are just 14 subscribers away from reaching that magic 100, which will help us get the word out even more about our Pondering God episodes here at Peace Lutheran Church. So if you haven't subscribed, what's the matter? How come you haven't subscribed yet? If you have subscribed, well, thank you. Well, thanks for subscribing. Feel free to share these videos with other people. Tell them that you owe them one. And so here it is. Well, I hope you have a blessed day. And I'll see you next time we ponder God together. As I say, that's all, folks.